6 masked killers, 6 real cases that left entire communities in fear. Let's start with the first name. Ed Gein is not just a criminal. He is the origin of a nightmare that would later shape modern horror. Characters from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Silence of the Lambs were not pure fiction. They were inspired by what was found inside a quiet farmhouse in Wisconsin. Ed Gein was born in 1906 in the small town of Plainfield. From the outside, nothing about the place suggested darkness. But inside his home, his childhood was shaped by isolation and control. His father was an alcoholic, largely absent. His mother, Augusta, was deeply religious and extremely strict. She believed the outside world was corrupt, especially women. In her eyes, only one woman was pure, herself. Ed grew up cut off from others. No friends, no normal social life, only his mother's voice, repeated daily, shaping his view of the world. When his father died, the isolation deepened. Then his brother died as well. In a suspicious fire, Ed was left alone with his mother until her death in 1945. That moment marked a turning point. After Augusta died, Ed kept her bedroom exactly as it was. The door stayed closed. The room became a shrine. The rest of the house slowly decayed, but that space remained untouched. Ed became obsessed with death and transformation. He read endlessly about ancient rituals, preserved bodies, and the idea of bringing the dead back. At night, he began visiting local cemeteries. At first, he only took what was already buried, mostly female corpses, often those who resembled his mother. Over time, that was no longer enough. In November 1957, Bernice Warden, the owner of a local hardware store, disappeared during the day. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses. When police searched Ed Gein's property, they entered a scene that would never be forgotten. What they found confirmed their worst fears. Objects made from human remains, furniture altered in ways no one expected, and evidence that what began in graveyards had crossed a line. Ed Gein was arrested without resistance. During questioning, he admitted to killing Bernice Warden and another woman, Mary Hogan. He claimed the rest came from graves. Investigators believed the truth was far darker. When asked why he did it, his answer was simple. He said he only wanted one thing: to bring his mother back. In 1958, Ed Gein was declared legally insane. He was sent to a psychiatric hospital instead of prison. For decades, he lived quietly behind locked doors, polite, smiling, as if the house in Plainfield had never existed. He died in 1984, but his legacy did not end there. Because from that moment on, the image of the masked killer was no longer fiction. It had a real face and a real name. The Zodiac Killer is not just one of America's most infamous criminals. He is a mystery that was never solved. Unlike other killers, Zodiac did not hide in silence. He wanted to be seen, he wanted to be read, and most of all, he wanted to be remembered. It began in Northern California in the late 1960s, an area known for quiet towns and peaceful nights. On December 20th, 1968, a young couple was sitting in their car on a secluded road. A man approached in the darkness. Moments later, both were shot. There were no witnesses, no clear suspect, only confusion. Months later, on July 4th, 1969, another couple was attacked. This time, the man survived. He later told police the attacker spoke calmly, almost casually, as if nothing unusual was happening. Then came the attack that would define the legend. On September 27, 1969, in broad daylight, 2 students were picnicking near a lake. A man wearing a black hood with a strange circular symbol approached them. He claimed to be an escaped prisoner. Then he tied them up. What happened next shocked the entire country. One victim survived, the other did not. Not long after, a taxi driver was killed in the middle of San Francisco. The killer disappeared into the night once again, but the murders were only part of the story. Soon, major newspapers began receiving letters. Inside were detailed descriptions of the crimes, maps, and strange coded messages. The writer called himself Zodiac. He demanded attention. He threatened more killings if his letters were not published. In one envelope, he included a piece of a victim's blood-stained clothing. It was proof. Police launched one of the largest investigations in American history. Hundreds of suspects were questioned. Thousands of leads were followed. But Zodiac was always one step ahead. Some of his ciphers were eventually decoded. Others remain unsolved to this day. As years passed, the letters stopped, the killings ended, and the man behind the mask vanished completely. Decades later, the question remains unanswered. Who was the Zodiac Killer? No arrest was ever made. No identity confirmed. Only a symbol remained. A circle with a cross, and the fear of a man who turned murder into a game. In 1946, Texarkana was a quiet town on the border between Texas and Arkansas. People left doors unlocked. Couples parked on dark roads without fear. That sense of safety ended in a single night. On February 22, 1946, a young couple was parked on a secluded road outside town. Without warning, a man stepped out of the darkness. His face was covered by a cloth sack with holes cut for his eyes. He attacked quickly, brutally, then vanished. Both victims survived, but what they described terrified the town. A masked figure, silent, methodical. 3 weeks later, it happened again. This time, the victims did not survive. From that moment on, fear spread faster than facts. The press gave the killer a name, the Phantom of Texarkana. Throughout the spring of 1946, the attacks continued. Young couples were targeted while sitting in parked cars. Always at night, always in isolated areas. The killer left almost nothing behind. No fingerprints, no clear footprints, no weapon that could be traced. Police described him as calm and deliberate, someone who understood how to avoid detection. As the body count rose, panic took over the town. Residents armed themselves. Curfews were imposed. Windows were locked. Streets emptied after sunset. Texarkana became known as the town of fear. Hundreds of people claimed to see the phantom in the woods or near the roads. Every shadow became a threat. Every noise felt like a warning. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. In May 1946, after the last attack, the phantom disappeared. No explanation, no arrest. One suspect briefly emerged, a man with a criminal background whose wife claimed he had confessed. But at the time, the law did not allow her testimony to be used. The case collapsed. Decades passed. The murders remained unsolved. The Phantom Killer was never identified, never captured. All that remained was a mask and the memory of a town that never felt safe again. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, California was gripped by fear. A masked intruder was breaking into homes at night. He was silent, methodical, always prepared. Victims later said the same thing. He was already inside the house before anyone realized it. He targeted couples and women living alone. Wearing a mask and gloves, he used a flashlight to blind his victims. He restrained them with precision. Then he disappeared, leaving no trace. At first, the crimes were reported as burglaries, then as assaults. Eventually, they became murders. By the late 1970s, the pattern was clear. The same methods, the same timing, the same terrifying control. Police believed the attacker had training. He moved like someone who understood procedures, someone who knew how investigations worked. The press gave him a name, the Golden State Killer. Over the years, he was linked to more than 50 assaults, dozens of home invasions, and multiple murders. Yet no suspect could be confirmed. Cities locked down, neighborhoods organized patrols, families slept with lights on, and still, he vanished after each attack. For decades, the case went cold. Then, in 2018, everything changed. Investigators used a new method, genealogical DNA, a technique that compared crime scene DNA with public ancestry databases. One name emerged: Joseph James DeAngelo, a former police officer, a husband, a neighbor. For more than 40 years, he had lived quietly among the same communities he once terrorized. In 2020, DeAngelo was sentenced to multiple life terms without parole. The mask was finally removed, but the fear he created never fully disappeared, because for decades, the Golden State Killer proved one thing: the most dangerous monsters do not hide in the shadows. They hide in plain sight. In August 1990, the city of Gainesville, Florida, was preparing for a new academic year. Students were returning to campus. Apartments were filling up. Everything felt routine. That sense of normality lasted only a few days. Young students began to disappear. Then their bodies were found inside their own apartments. The doors were unlocked. There were no signs of forced entry. Panic spread quickly. The killer moved silently. He targeted students living alone or with roommates who were temporarily absent. He entered at night. He wore gloves, often a mask. Police realized something unsettling. The killer knew the layout of the apartments. He knew when to strike, and he never stayed long. Within days, Gainesville became a city under siege. Parents rushed to bring their children home. Students slept in groups. Some barricaded their doors with furniture. The press gave the killer a name: the Gainesville Ripper. Behind the mask was a man named Danny Rolling. Rolling had a long history of violence and instability. He drifted from town to town, living in the shadows, watching. In Gainesville, he escalated rapidly. Multiple victims in a very short time. What made the case even more disturbing was what investigators later discovered. Rolling carefully staged scenes, as if he wanted the crimes to be remembered. Eventually, DNA evidence linked him to the murders. He was arrested without resistance. During interrogation, Rolling confessed, not only to the Gainesville killings, but to other crimes committed across the country. In 1994, he was sentenced to death. But his impact on Gainesville did not end with his arrest. The city was changed forever. Years later, his crimes would inspire a new kind of horror, one that focused on masked killers who moved through quiet neighborhoods, watching, waiting. The fear Danny Rolling created became part of popular culture, but for Gainesville, it was never fiction. In 1918, New Orleans was a city of music, nightlife, and crowded streets. Jazz clubs stayed open late. People felt safe behind closed doors. That illusion was shattered one night. A killer began breaking into homes after midnight. He did not force entry. He used the victim's own axe, found inside the house. The attacks were sudden, silent, and terrifying. Victims were struck in their sleep. Some survived, many did not. The press quickly gave the unknown attacker a name: the Axeman of New Orleans. Between 1918 and 1919, panic spread across the city. No one knew who would be next. No one understood how he chose his victims. Then the killer did something no one expected. He wrote a letter. In March 1919, newspapers received a message claiming to be from the Axeman himself. In it, he promised to spare anyone playing jazz music in their home on a specific night. The city reacted immediately. That night, jazz poured into the streets. Bands played until dawn. Homes filled with music, not silence. No murders were reported. Then, just as suddenly as he appeared, the Axeman stopped. The attacks ended. The letters ceased. The killer vanished without a trace. No suspect was ever arrested. No identity confirmed. The Axeman became more than a criminal. He became a legend, a symbol of fear, of anonymity, and of a city haunted by a killer who was never seen. To this day, the Axeman of New Orleans remains one of America's oldest unsolved serial murder cases, and one of its most disturbing. If this story caught your attention, leave a like. And if you want more real cases, real mysteries, and forgotten files, subscribe to the channel, because there are still many stories left in the dark. And until the next one, take care of yourselves and stay alert.